Jeff Passan, good morning.
Did I say you would or you could?
No, would. I think you're pretty adamant about the fact the Mariners will only be 3.5 back. And now here we are. It's worse. 6 back, 3 losses in a row, walked off twice. Everything looks kind of the same as it did before they fired Scott Servais.
Yeah. So it's surprising how that happens.
Yeah.
You know, we took calls last hour, Jeff, and just kind of asked Mariner fans out there, what do you think? Why? Why is this team 69-69? Why is this team seeing a 16-game swing over 2.5 months to the Houston Astros from 10 up to now 6 down? Why? And for me, I land on just these. I land on the players. You know, I was sharing a personal story that, like, for me, my last year of college, I didn't play well enough. I struggled. And because of it, Jim Lambright was fired, Scott Linehan was fired, Dick Baird was fired, Randy Hart was fired, dear friends that recruited me who I just admired and still do to this day. And I felt the level of responsibility. And to me, I put it on players like J.P. Crawford that are hitting $198, Mitch Garver that's having the worst hitting season in the history of the Seattle Mariners. He's hitting $164. Mitch Haniger, who, you know, can't hit a fastball. I mean, we go down the line. I put it on player productivity as much as anything else. But if you were to answer that question, why have the Mariners fallen so far in the last 2.5 months? What does Jeff Passan point to?
I think players certainly are the biggest part of it. But I don't think while we're blaming players, we should necessarily absolve others who are involved here. I mean, let's be dead honest here. Scott Servais was the manager of the team when they were losing 8 games out of 9 leading to his firing. He was the manager of the team when they were blowing a 10-game lead. Jerry Dipoto was the president of baseball operations for this team when they were putting it together in the offseason and doing so without having as much offensive firepower as they needed to go out and win. And look, I don't think they're going to come into any given season thinking, we don't have enough here. I think their model has gotten it wrong, straight up wrong on offensive players in recent seasons. But I'm also going to look at John Stanton and Chris Larson. Like, they're the ones who own this team. They are ultimately the ones who choose where this team goes and what direction that is. And when you are putting limits on the team to the extent that they have, of course you're going to wind up in a situation like this where if things don't go exactly as they needed to, it's going to go too far sideways to recover. And I'd like to believe that that's a lesson that ownership would have learned in recent seasons, particularly last year. You know, you go to the playoffs and then you have a year where you miss it by a game, and you know how precious every season is, particularly when you have the pitching that you do. And so you can't leave that sort of thing up to chance. You can't 54% this sucker. You just can't. And so 2 years in a row now of having the same thing happen, it's completely unaccessible. And if the only person who's paying the price for that is Scott Servais, I'm not sure what that says about the organization.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Jeff, especially the last part of it. I think that's the thing that has upset me the most, even now, almost a week and a half, 2 weeks later after the Scott firing, is that it feels like he's the one who's being asked to bear the brunt of a joint effort. And I think that's the unfairness of that is what is sort of stuck with me here.
I think that's totally fair. And you can, by the way, get rid of players. Like, Mitch Garver doesn't have to stick around right now. Mitch Haniger.
No, he can go to Cincinnati and have an 800 OPS with Ty France.
and that, I mean, that is part of it too. It's like, okay, guys, do not let the sunk cost fallacy get in the way here. Like, If someone's not performing and they're not good enough, then eat the money. It's spent already. Like this money, it is gone.
Yeah, but hold on. I don't have any, like, especially with Garver, the guy's turned into a backup catcher. I mean, like, I don't really have any problem with them allowing him to sit here as a backup catcher, making the money and hope that eventually he'll turn back into the player he was supposed to be. But the point remains, what is wrong with the model that has allowed them to bring those guys in?
Mike, how long was his leash?
Who cares? He's a backup catcher. His leash could be forever.
No, Mike, here's my point. His leash was.
Oh, was? Way too long.
Yes.
Way too long. Yes, absolutely.
That's my point, though. For getting substantive at-bats. His leash was as long as it was because his contract was as big as it was. Period.
You don't think it has anything to do with his history?
No, I don't. What history?
I think it has something to do with his history and something to do with the lack of other options that they had. I mean, like, unfortunately, they have built this thing in such a way, and Brock pointed it out earlier. While they did a rebuild, they didn't complete the rebuild, and so you're looking at a AAA system that doesn't have hitters ready to spit out. They called up Luis Urias for September call-ups. It's insane.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. If we step back and look at it that way, you're right. It's kind of wild how much timing matters in a rebuild, right? And how if you don't have, let's look at the Cubs back in 2014. The Cubs knew that they had Chris Bryant and Javier Baez and Kyle Schwarber, and at that time Aubrey Almora was supposed to be good. Anthony Rizzo was there already. They knew they had this whole group of position players and that they desperately needed starting pitching. And they went out and they spent $155 million to go get John Lester and bring him in and be the fulcrum of that staff. The Mariners really have not done anything close to that. Julio Rodriguez was there already, so I'm not looking at his contract. But who has been the big free agent complement to the starting pitching that they have right now? Bolton Wong? Jorge Polanco? Mitch Garver? Mitch Haniger? I mean, that's it, right? And I'm as guilty as anyone here of saying, oh, you're spoiled for wanting. No, I was so wrong about that. You're not spoiled for wanting more. You should have wanted more. You should have gotten more. End of story.
So, Jeffrey, John Stanton, Chris Larson call Jeff Passan and say, what advice do you have for us?
The first thing I tell them, and I know this is never going to happen, the first thing I tell them is if you want your fan base to take you seriously, then make a serious run at Juan Soto.
I just saw a projection for 14 years and $600 million or $585 million.
Yeah, and the Mariners have the money to do it. Everyone has the money to do it. But that's the fallacy of what Major League Baseball has sold, is this idea that market size is an impediment to bringing in players of a certain contract level. Juan Soto will make his money back. And not to the extent that Shohei Ohtani would have, but Juan Soto, I do believe, will make his money back. Number two, I would trade a pitcher at this point. I know it's painful to hear, but I would, whichever pitcher I have the least faith in to stay healthy over the long term, I would move him right now. Because, guys, let's look at what has happened this season, and let's look at what we've learned. We have learned that 5 great starting pitchers will not take you to the playoffs. Not in 2024, not in 2025. They can get you to 500. They can get you to a 10-game lead in the division, but they're not going to get you all the way to the finish line. So at this point, I've been really reticent to do that. I think it's time now.